Can you give me a roar? Everybody, it's Mikkel Moose, and this week I show you how I made this Disney's Frozen inspired dress. Okay, so what I'm going to use today is I've got needle and thread, I've got my sewing machine, I have some scissors, I also have some sequins, I've got some tulle, I've got a little scrap of some sequin-y fabric, and I've got this velvet blue. I've also got some white banding and Elsa the doll. I don't actually know what I'm going to use, like I'm going to use all of the stuff that I've shown, or if I'm just going to use some of it. I've never actually made a dress of this magnitude before or anything quite like it, so this is going to be kind of a new experience for me. There's going to be a lot of trial and error. So yeah, I'm going to start with the skirt, and I'm going to use the blue fabric for that. I also didn't show, but I may end up using some elastic banding or some Velcro just to keep the dress on. So I'm going to start by laying out the fabric around her waist. Actually, I'm going to pull it up so it's about by her chest. And then I'm going to do my wrapping. Alright, so I've got my fabric. I'm going to roll her up. And I'm going to cut the length down here. I want it to flare out at the bottom, so I'm going to make the bottom a little bit bigger than the top. And it looks pretty crazy. We'll see. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew. I'm going to fold over the top and the bottom, and then I'm going to flip it good side to good side, and I'm going to sew all the way down here. I know there's supposed to be a slit, but I'm going to add that in later. Right now I'm just trying to get the skirt so it fits properly and looks right on the bottom. So I'm going to sew, and then I'll show you what it looks like. So I finished sewing, and I've gotten it to be a little loose in the back, which is what I wanted, and front, and if you can see, it goes really high up right now. This isn't actually the top part of the dress. I'm going to do a separate part for the top, and I was kind of thinking maybe doing the top like this, but I think that's too far off from where Elsa's dress was. This is way too bright blue. Elsa's dress is very muted, and it was very sparkly like this is, but it wasn't. It was very pale blue, like a snowy blue instead of, so I'm ditching that. I think I'm going to do the sequins, and I will sew sequins onto the bodice. So I think the skirt is pretty good, except it needs that. It needs the slit. So where did I put my scissors? There they are. So I'm going to add that, and I believe, from what I can recall, the slit came straight up in the middle. And I'm just going to cut it a slit just going up to where her knees are, and then I'm going to fold over the edges and I'm going to sew those. So I'm going to do that now. So I finished putting the slit in the skirt. It's not as high as Elsa's, but this Elsa here is going to be a little bit more modest. So now we move from the realm of familiar into something a little bit more complex, for me at least. I am going to work on the top portion of the dress, which is the bodice. And Elsa's dress is a heart shape up at the top, and then it has like a triangular shape right here, in the sewing, and the top seems a little bit lighter than the bottom, but I'm going to use the same fabric, and then I'm going to use sequins on the top. I think I already said that. Sorry. I'm going to get my fabric, and I'm going to figure out the length that I need. Remember, we're going to go a little bit bigger. That's just kind of one rule of sewing. And I'm going to wrap it around her. So I'm going to use the scissors, and I'm just going to cut up. And I'm going to make the triangle pretty exaggerated right now because I need that extra fabric for the seam allowance. And because I don't want it to fall quite that far, but like I said, seam allowances are important. And now this is what I have right now. I'm going to cut off these 2 extra strips of fabric there. Now I am going to sew. It's a little lopsided, but now I'm going to sew this, and I'm going to leave the top alone for right now. I'm just going to work on the bottom, and we'll get to the top. So I finished sewing the bottom portion there, and I will hold it up on the doll so you guys can see it. See? It looks nice. I mean, you can kind of see the difference in like the texture of the fabric and things. So now I'm going to start working on the top. Because I want it to go a little bit higher than her arms, I'm going to cut down, center this, and then I'm going to cut down right where her arm seam is, just a little bit. And I'm going to fold that over, and then I'm going to sew it. Okay, so you see it just a little bit. And then I'll fold that over and sew it, and that way this will fit underneath her arm a little bit better. Okay, so I got the 2 sides there. I'll fold those over and I'll sew those. And then I have to fold over these corners here, and then I'll sew those, and that will give me a little bit of a heart shape kind of starting. And stay down so I can see what you'll look like. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a line down the center here, cut a line a little bit deeper than the other ones, and I'll fold that over, and hopefully that will give me that heart-shaped neckline after I sew it all. I'm going to sew it, and I'll show it to you afterwards, and we'll keep our fingers crossed that it turns out the way I want it to. Well, that was definitely not easy. It started off easy enough, and then part of my fabric ripped, so I had to kind of modify the original design to make up for that little rip that I got in the fabric. I was just being a little overzealous. At the moment, the heart shape is not staying up, but we'll take care of that. The tulle, I've never actually really sewn much with tulle, so this is going to be kind of a unique experience for me, but I thought this would be a really good material to use for the top, very gauzy portion of Elsa's dress. So what I'm going to do is this is going to go on the top and then down her arms. And that's where that binding comes in, because I might have to use this just to have something to sew this to. I don't know. So I think I'm going to double up the mesh just so I have a more gauzy look to it. I'm going to figure out the size that I need to go around Elsa's upper torso and around her back. So now I've got this big piece of gauzy, and I've actually ended up quartering it just because I cut it way too thick, and I was like, well, might as well fold it again. So I'm just gonna lay this on top, and then we'll move on from there. I'm just going to sew this to this, and okay. So I finished sewing on the tulle up to the top, and I think what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna cut holes for the arms, like I normally would, like making a t-shirt or something like that. Hopefully that would work with the tool. Sewing the tool was fairly easy. It moves around a lot on you. Okay, so I'm starting on the sleeves, and I cut a hole for the first one. And like I said earlier, I'm not sure how this is going to work out with the tool, because I've never had to sew this before. It sewed really well on to the fabric, but I don't know about sewing tool to tool. That might be different. I'm going to cut the next sleeve hole here. I've got so far. Obviously I don't want to leave the top like crazy looking like this, so I'll need to do something about that. I'm going to pin the back of the dress so it'll stay put a little bit better for me while I am doing this next portion. I'm going to try and fold the fabric in and then sew over the top, and then I'll cut that excess fabric off, but I'm just going to do it this way. I've never really worked with the tool before, so and I'm going to loop back here because the tool's got lots of holes in it, so I don't think a knot would hold very well. Okay, so I finished sewing the shoulders and I cut off the excess fabric underneath. You can see the stitches. It's not my best work. And then I kind of continued on trying to figure out how to do the sleeve. And I did a mesh sleeve. And I only did one layer and I sewed it and it's holding pretty well. I just tied a lot of knots in it. I tied a lot of knots in it because I was frightened that it wouldn't hold very well. But I made it a little extra long so that way when it goes on I can bunch it up on the top, so I have a lot of fabric to kind of sew to this piece so I can make sure it's really secure. So let me show you how I did that sleeve real quick. All I did was I just wrapped a piece of fabric around her arm and got a general idea of the length and the thickness that the sleeve needed to be, and then I just cut it out, and then so I've got my needle and thread, and now what I'm going to do that I've got the length that I like, so I'm just going to fold the fabric over and start sewing. And I'm doing the same thing that I did with the first time when I was sewing with the tool up here, is I just kind of go back and kind of create a loop because I'm scared that the knot's gonna get pulled through. And then I just kind of do an in and out stitch all the way down, and every about 5 stitches I stop and tie a knot. So I finished sewing this sleeve here, and now I'm just going to cut off some of this excess fabric, the excess fabric on the end there, just because I'm scared of it ripping and then the seam coming out. Now I'm going to flip it right side out. This is what it looks like. And so now I'm going to put the sleeve on. I already put this one sleeve on. And it's a little bunched up right here by the shoulder, but I feel it's on there pretty securely, which I like. And what I did was I actually sewed it while it was on the doll, which I generally don't do, but this time I just decided to do it. So I put the seam underneath her arm so you couldn't really see it. And then I bunched it up at the top, and I just took my sewing needle and I did like a back and forth stitch. Stay there, Dolly. I just did a back and forth stitch, tying knots every once in a while. Once I finish sewing her sleeve on, I'm going to actually start sewing some sequins on the front of her dress. I'm just going to do some like yellow or silver sequins and just kind of sew them on the front of the bodice to her dress. So I'm going to finish sewing this, and I'm going to put some sequins on here, and then I shall show you guys. Alright, so sewing on all those sequins took a really long time. It took me about an hour to finally finish sewing all the sequins on, and I like how it turned out. I don't know, some of the ones on the bottom, I changed the color a little bit, and then I just kind of stuck with the silver towards the center. Now that I've got all the sequins on the bodice, now I have to attach the bodice to the skirt portion. And so I am going to take it off, and I'm going to sew around the bottom. There's the bodice. You can see all my stitches on the inside. I'm just going to cut off some of this excess fabric at the top because as you could see, it was really long. I didn't quite need it that long, but just to make it less bulky when you put it on her. Cut about an inch and a half maybe off the top there. And now I'm just going to line this up, figure out where I want it to fall. And I want the slit matching up with the point of the bodice. And I'm just going to begin by getting that stitch right in the center so it stays where I want it there. And I'm doing this by hand just so I can control a little bit more, and I don't want to mess up any of the sequins, so I'm doing this by hand. You probably could do it with your sewing machine and put the sequins on afterwards, but I just thought it would be easier this way, and also this way I can match up the seams a little bit easier. I'm just going to sew all the way around the bottom, and I'm going to leave the sides unattached because I'm going to use some Velcro so that way you can get the dress on and off easily. So I'm just going to continue sewing around the bottom here, and then I'll show you guys when I finish. I finished sewing all the way around the bottom, and her bodice is now on. I was going to use Velcro to close up the back, but I can't find it. Where are you going? Behind the Velcro. So I'm just going to use some buttons instead. And I'm just going to sew them on. And now I'm going to do that. As you can hear, my small assistant is awake and active at the moment. And she is very excited about playing with her new Elsa. Okay, so I got the buttons on, and now I need to find out where the buttonholes are going to be, so I'm just going to pull it really tight, like how I want it. Find where the button is going to poke through. Do a little snippety snip snip. So the dress is finished. I really like how the bottom portion turned out. I really like the bodice too. I am not too happy with the tulle portion. Like the seams look kind of funny in the back. I folded over the fabric just so it wouldn't look that bad. Yeah, that funny. Oh my gosh, you guys! Honestly, just stay out of the. You guys, stop. Stay there. So I folded down the back just so it wouldn't be weird looking. But it's got a little train. I think it looked really cool. And this week I challenge you to make your own Frozen inspired look. And send me a picture or a video response. You can send it here on YouTube, or you can send it on my Facebook on the Cow Moose. I really thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and got some good ideas. and comment, like, subscribe, do all that cool stuff. And I'll see you guys next week.